Hi, my name is Mary Esther Malloy, and welcome to the Mindful Cesarean. If you are planning a birth by cesarean or preparing for a VBAC, we have some inspiring birth stories here for you. Please also visit themindfulcesarean.com, where you can download our toolkit for a healthy birth. Here is Elena telling the story of claiming her son's cesarean birth as sacred.
I think we're in a pendulum swing where it's like, at one time, like, cesareans were actually like popular and people scheduled them, and and then it was like we swung in this direction of like, that is the worst thing you can do, and like the doctors are the devil. Like there's kind of like a sort of a swing. And so I certainly, and myself, I wanted to have the experience very much of a natural birth, and I'm dear friends with Elena McAllister, who founded Choices in Childbirth. So I was like, who is the best doula I can get? And she was like, Mary Esther Malloy. Mary Esther and I connected, and I had a lot of fear about the labor process, but I wanted very much to give birth naturally, and we decided to go to the Roosevelt Birth Center because my husband he felt like I'm of advanced maternal age, and he wanted there to be like the hospital option and a continuity of care, and so we went with Midwifery of Manhattan, and so I felt like I was getting the best of the best, like Sylvie and Mary Esther, and taking like primrose oil and to everything, dates and all this stuff. And my pregnancy was actually quite wonderful and easy. I didn't have a difficult pregnancy. And then at 36 weeks at my ultrasound, I was diagnosed with low amniotic fluid, and they sort of brought up the possibility of induction to me, and I freaked out and was like, started really panicking and spoke to Sylvie, and I was like crying about it, and she's like, it's okay, like, just try to get your fluid back up and you'll see what happens. And so in that 4 weeks in between my 36th week and my due date, my fluid went back up, and I drank lots of coconut water, I was like eating watermelon, I was doing everything that I could. Had women praying for me all over the country. I don't know how, if it's okay to talk about the spiritual aspect of, of that, but some witchy women were like praying for me. And every time I'd go back in, they'd be like, your fluid is amazing, and like it's this high, and like, what did you do? It's like I have some witches praying for me, and drinking lots of coconut water. And so up until literally the night before my due date, my fluid was totally fine, and we were taking birth classes, and then the day before my due date, I was scheduled for an ultrasound and went in. It was the same doctor, because the way that it works at Roosevelt is that the doctors do the ultrasounds and then the midwives do your checkups. And my cervix was like not at all dilated, it was very, and the doctor said, well, your fluid has gone down again, and I think we should induce tonight. And I just, again, started, because I'd gotten clearance again for the birth center. I'd been like not cleared I'd been like, no, you can't go to the birth center. Then I was cleared again for the birth center. And I just like lost it. And the doctor said to me, his name is Dr. Rosen, I think. And he said to me, he's like, what is so upsetting to you about the possibility of induction? Like, why is that so upsetting to you? And I said, because from the research and the statistics, when you start with one procedure, it tends to lead to another. And I don't want to have a cesarean. I want to have a natural birth. And he's like, okay. And he's like, well, what if, I said, I want my baby to come when my baby wants to come. And he's like, what if this is your baby's way of telling you that he wants to come now? So it was an interesting like mental switch. And he said, look, go home, and we're not going to do anything tonight, and go home. And if your fluid goes up again, we'll just wait again. And so I went home, and I sat on the couch, and there was this spot, like this thick spot, and I was like, oh, I wonder if that's like normal secretions or if that's my amniotic fluid. And I called my midwives, and they're like, and she's like, well, describe it, and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I don't know how to describe it. It's just like a wet spot on my couch. She's like, well, I can't diagnose amniotic fluid over the phone. You're going to have to come to the hospital. I was like, fuck. And I just knew. I was like, I know that it's going to be, like, I just knew it. And so we packed a bag and went to the hospital. And sure enough, she did a culture, and it was amniotic fluid. So my water had been leaking, which is, I think, why the amniotic fluid had gone down again. And I just want to backtrack to say that when I had first gotten that first information that I had low fluid at 36 weeks, a dear friend of mine who was also a doula but in Canada had done like a meditation with me, and I think this is useful for doulas to have this information. And she'd asked me what my greatest fear was, like what are your two greatest fears? She actually had me draw them. And I was like death, like dying in childbirth, and a cesarean. And so she was like, so imagine that you're in there and you have to have a cesarean. What would make you feel empowered? So she asked me that question, and this was like at 36 weeks when it was really just like a very light possibility. And I was like, well, I would want to feel the presence of my ancestors. I would want to have music. I would want to have my husband in the room. I would want to have my doula in the room. I would want to be singing. I would want to have my stones with me. Like, I just sort of made a list of what I would want, and then put it away. And it was like, along with the other parts of your birth plan or birth intention, which might be a better phrase. So fast forward to we're in the hospital, and they said, yeah, you're gonna have to, your water is broken. It's been possibly 24 hours, and so you're gonna sleep here tonight. We'll see where you are tomorrow, and then move probably towards an induction. 3 minutes. Oh God. Okay. So that's what happened. The labor. Well, they started the induction, the pitocin, and they given me, I think, Cervidil to help the cervix dilate. And my contractions started getting strong. They called in Mary Esther, and she came, and I was laboring actively. It felt quite active. The chart was going like this. I didn't know that you weren't supposed to do nipple stimulation when you were on a stimulation of pitocin. So this is before Mary Esther came, and my husband were like, let's do the nipple stimulation. And then the thing starts going like, do, 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 do. And they're like, oh God, they all rush in. And then Mary Esther's like, you have to tell them that you did nipple stimulation because they're going to otherwise get really concerned. So anyway, at that point, we had what felt like very active labor, but my cervix still wasn't dilating. It never got past 3 centimeters. And so at a certain point, they wanted to do a test where you have to actually test the head of the baby, which I found that actually the testing, the labor pains felt but they felt manageable, and I was in a process. But the actual, when they would go in and try to measure the dilation while you were in active labor, it felt horrible. And they told me, they're like, to do this measurement of the baby's head, it's going to be more invasive, more painful. And at this point, it had already been like 24 hours or something that we'd been in the hospital. And so I opted for an epidural at that point, so that ideally I could sleep and hopefully the cervix would dilate, and went to sleep. And at this point, rotation of midwives, my cervix never dilated past 3 centimeters. And so in the morning they were like, well, let's just keep laboring and see what happens. So that was the attitude. I definitely had an attitude of, let's just see what happens. Let's keep going, see what happens. And at one point, I think Mary Esther and she was like, let's change the mood. We put on music. We had a dance party waiting. And then I guess at about 36 hours, at that point, they were concerned of the possibility of infection because the water had broken so much earlier. And so Sylvie said, I think we're going to call it. I think we need to take the thing. And every time what would happen is they would increase the pitocin, and his heart rate would accelerate to and then he would be fine but then without the pitocin, the contractions weren't increasing. And so we opted for the cesarean, and and that was the part I got very sad and wept. And then the woman who came in to be my OB was in with Sylvie, and I said to her, this is my sacred birth. This is the birth that I have, and so this is what I want. I want skin to skin. I want delayed cord clamping. I want my music. I want my stones. I want my, and I just asked for it. I just asked her for everything that I wanted, and she was like, of course, whatever you want. The only thing, Mary Esther couldn't come in because of the number of people. And so when we went into, and there was a long delay between finding out and having it, which actually ended up being a blessing in our case, because I got to be with Mary Esther and Jai, and we got to talk about the vision, and Mary Esther shared her story of her own daughters, how she got pregnant with her daughter, and then I told the story of the conception, and also I got to speak to Surya and tell him, my son, I said, hey, this is what's happening. We're about to go into this different, you're going to leave this world of my body, you're going to come into a totally different world, and it's going to be in this kind of a procedure, and this isn't what we planned, this isn't what we expected, but this is what you're telling us, that this is how you want to come in, because this is the choice. And so it was a very, there was just a lot of beauty and prayer in that. And so in the OR, we had all those things, and I remember also they started to talk about, because in the OR it can often be for the anesthesiologist and all the people in there, it's sort of routine for them, whereas for us it's not routine at all. And at one point they started talking about other things, and I said, excuse me, this is my birth, and I need you to not talk about anything that doesn't relate immediately to my birth. I don't want you to be talking about casual conversation. This is my sacred birth, so please respect that. And they did. You know, whatever they thought in their minds, they shut up. And so I remember that my son came into the world, and I sung him in to the world, and that was a beautiful gift. And so that's the story.
Thank you for listening to this mindful cesarean birth story. For more articles, resources, and to download the Toolkit for a Healthy Birth, please visit themindfulcesarean.com. Again, thank you for watching. I'm Mary Esther Malloy.